Welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. I am Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, your radio flagship home of the Dallas Cowboys. Joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network, and he is also a very proud LSU Tiger after they win the College World Series, not long after winning the women's basketball title, not long after winning the college football championship. Brian Broaddus, it must be a great day and another great week to be an LSU Tiger and your stupid school continuing to dominate all the sports.
Yeah, I even told my son, who goes to your proud alma mater, the University of Texas, I said, see, you could have gone to LSU and been really, really good at sports. You know, you could have been that guy, but you chose to go to Texas and get in their top 5 business school in the country. And you know what? I'm sure you're having regrets about that right now as we celebrate another championship at LSU. But no, Bobby, very proud to be an LSU alum. And so, you know, we're always in the news, good and bad. You know, we've had Les Miles news come up. We've had other things come up that, you know, it's not always been proud about our athletic program. But what the ladies have done and what the baseball team is, and that baseball team had pressure all year. They were the number 1 team in the country up until basically the last weekend of the college baseball season. And, you know, Wake Forest had been outstanding all year in the ACC, and they carried it. LSU carried that, and, you know, they were down a couple of different times in elimination games in that tournament and found ways to win. So a credit to them, credit to the program, and, you know, credit to you for bringing it up. So thank you very much.
Yeah, there you go. You get your LSU love a little bit there. And LSU very well here in the next, I don't know, about 2 weeks or so, they very well could have the top 2 picks in Major League Baseball's draft with Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, the dominant pitcher. As long as Paul Skeens' arm hasn't fallen off from the 1,500 pitches LSU had him throw over the last, 3 weeks or whatever it was. But we're not here to talk about the LSU Tigers or college baseball or anything else.
I could actually talk about LSU all day. Yeah,
all day. You could talk about their rowing team, I'm sure, or whatever else. I don't even know that they have
our
a rowing
sand
team.
volleyball team's getting it together. Trust me on this.
I bet they're about to dominate that too, because LSU, that's what they do. They win titles. They don't produce top
scholars.
They don't produce top tier employees for the workforce, but by God, they're going to win these college titles. All right, Brian. So we're doing our roster inventory. We're continuing that today. And now we are looking at the defensive line. We finished the offensive side of the ball. We're taking a look at the defensive line. Currently on the roster, Brian, there are 15 defensive linemen. And it's interesting the way you break this out. I am not including Micah Parsons into the defensive line group. He's a hybrid pass rusher, but he's not with the D-line group like that. So here is what we're looking at. On defensive ends, we've got Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, Darrell Johnson, the undrafted free agent rookie, DeMarcus Lawrence, Tyrus Wheat, Sam Williams, and then recently they signed the TCU edge rusher, former mid-round pick, Ben Banagoo. And then on the interior of the defensive line, they have Isaac Alarcon, who is making the shift to the defensive line, Quinton Bohanna, Neville Gallimore, Jonathan Hankins, Oso Digizua, Mozzie Smith, and then they've got their hybrid end tackle type of players in Chauncey Golston and Junior Fehoko. So when you look at this defensive line group, they could carry, I suppose, as few as 8. They've carried in the past as many as 11. I doubt they would do that, especially with Micah Parsons kind of doubling as an edge rusher and DeMarvion Overshone being a guy who can rush the passer a little bit. So I would guess at most they would keep 10. So we're looking at 8 to 10 players here, Brian. Right off the jump, when you just hear of the defensive line group, what do you think of the depth this team has currently and the general outlook for their positions for 1 technique, 3 technique, the edge rushers, everything?
I think they've gotten a lot better here, Bob. And I think to me that, with the addition, we've talked about a bunch about Mozzie Smith and what he potentially could be. Getting back Jonathan Hankins, I think, is a big get for them. The fact that they've also found a way, they had Dorrance Armstrong last year on the rise, what he was able to do at right end. the fact that Sam Williams is going to compete with him for that spot. I think that Sam Williams could very well take that spot at right defensive end. You know, the reliability of Tank Lawrence there at left end, you know, that's always going to come into question. So you have to have the ability to have some guys that can kind of fill in when guys get banged up a little bit. I would like to think that Chauncey Golston, if you ask me in the 1st of July, like we're talking about right now, who would be a player that could take that next step, I think Chauncey Golston would be a guy that I would like to bring to the stage. I like what they've thought about with him. I don't think he's as good on the edge. I think they've seen that. They feel like that him playing inside, he plays the run so well. He's not an explosive guy off the edge, so playing him inside at the 3 or that under tackle is, I think, the perfect spot for him. And we'll see with Osa Odighizuwa. I think he's gotten better every time he's gone out there. This is a position, Bobby, that or a position group with the defensive line that I feel like that if I was an opponent or I was somebody that was following the Dallas Cowboys on the pro side, if I was a pro director for the Buccaneers or for the Rams or for the Chargers or something like that, I would be following the Dallas Cowboys just for the fact of looking at their defensive linemen. Yep. I think they've got a really good group of guys, and maybe they're going to have to put 1 or 2 guys on the street or they become surplus. That's a team, if I have surplus, maybe I have a surplus in backs, you know. And so that's what I would do. That would be a team I would definitely follow with the Cowboys.
So as we take a look at the position group and we break it down a little bit, let's just start with the pure edge rushers. They have 7 of them right now. We mentioned them there: Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, DeMarcus Lawrence, Sam Williams, Darrell Johnson, Tyrus Wheat, and Ben Banogu. I think Banogu's a depth guy that's just been added here to compete during camp. Tyrus Wheat, the undrafted free agent from Mississippi State, could be a practice squad candidate. I don't know that he'd break out necessarily and make the roster. Darrell Johnson from Liberty is a guy I think they do like, and I think they believe has some upside, but I still think he's got an uphill climb here just because of how crowded the defensive line field is going to be. So when we look at the edge rushers, are the only guys we're really confident about, like, hey, that's a slam dunk that they're on this roster, is those top 4: Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Sam Williams?
Yeah, I think that the what you mentioned, you know, with I think Tyrus Wheat is kind of an under the radar guy when you watch him play. Oh, and I watched him play at Mississippi State. I think that maybe he doesn't fit a lot of people's eye because he's like a 6'2" guy, 260, very similar, to what you might have, maybe he's an inside guy more so than an outside guy. But you watch him at Mississippi State, he was a guy that was in my, my top 200 that I had, a late round type of guy. I think they did a really good job of addressing, some guys that if in fact their practice squad could be a pretty good group of the young developmental type defensive edges. Yeah. And so maybe that'll allow them, if they want to move on, or I mentioned that surplus thing, if you need to move one of your guys, well, if you've got 2 young guys that practice squad potential, it's a little bit easier to move others, so you can say, okay, we've got these guys, we feel good about them. We can move this guy because we'll have this guy on the practice squad, or these 2 guys, in order to make up for making a move or making a trade. You do not want to put offensive or defensive linemen on the street. You just don't want to, because they're hard positions to find. And the Cowboys actually had a couple of spots there at the offensive defensive line. They might have a little bit of some surplus that other teams would welcome. And if you can convince, you say, hey, listen, we're the Rams, we've got running backs, or we're the Commanders, We've got running backs. You could move one of your players to them and they could send you that back depending on how, because there's a couple positions that we've talked about: running back, linebacker, two spots right there that the Cowboys don't have really good depth at, or well-known depth at, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to describe it. And when you look at the edge rushers, I think they do like them. We'll talk about Isaiah Land from Florida A&M as a guy in the linebacker group, but that's another guy who's sort of a hybrid edge rusher that I think they think highly of. So I do think they believe they've got a couple of good, projects here that they could stash on the practice squad, or maybe they feel like, hey, look, we don't necessarily, if somebody's coming along quicker than they thought, then maybe they go, oh, okay, maybe Dante Fowler's expendable. Maybe we've got a trade partner here for that, or on the defensive line, the interior of the defensive line. Maybe they go, look, we may have to cut one of Bohanna or Gallimore. Maybe somebody wants to take a gamble on Gallimore if they had him as a third-round graded player a couple years ago. On the interior of the defensive line, you've got Jonathan Hankins, Osa Odigizua, Mozzie Smith, Isaac Alarcon, Quentin Bohanna, Neville Gallimore. Again, I think the only slam dunks there, you got three of them: Hankins, Odigizua, Mozzie Smith. Those are your slam dunks. The guys who are there going to be some questions about are Alarcon, Bohanna, and Gallimore. I think Alarcon's got a real uphill fight, obviously, but they like him enough that they've tried to work it out to keep him around here in any capacity they can.
Well, yeah, and just to kind of briefly talk about Alarcon and where he fits. He's going to he's run out of his exemptions for being a international player. Yep. So if he makes your team, it's going to have to be one of the 53. If you put him on the practice squad, he's going to have to be one of those guys. So
got to unmute, Brian. As Brian has a coughing fit here, but he's unmuting, and he'll continue to weigh in here. There you go, Brian.
Well, I'm just struggling here. All of a sudden, I don't cough all day, and then all of a sudden I get on the show and I start coughing.
I bring it out of people routinely.
Routinely.
You're not the first person to say, as soon as I have to talk to Bobby, I feel sick. So that's not unusual at all.
Yeah, I was trying to say, God, I hate when I do that. I apologize to everybody out there. I went out walking today. It's like 100 degrees outside, and so when you walk, you makes you a little bit crazy. But anyway, with Alarcon, I was talking about his situation where he is going to have to make the roster on the 53 or be one of the 16 of the practice squad that they have, or that number. I think they kept the number the same, but the reason why you would keep him, because he is legitimately a good practice squad player, because he could play offensive line on the scout team. And then when they flip over to the other side, he could go play defensive line. So that's having a legitimate practice squad player, whether you like the development or not. I mean, we'll see. But, he's gotten better every year. There's been some preseason games where others who have had more experience have played in games and been a lot worse than him.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see how Dan Quinn is excited about having him as a guy that they could work with. And, that's all you need right there.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the hybrid guys, Chauncey Golston, Junior Fehoko, I think both of those guys are clearly on. Fehoko being their top pick on day 3, Golston being a guy they used a top 100 pick on in recent years and that they think has flexibility to do some different things. Fajoko's a guy who during, OTAs and minicamp was standing up from a 2-point stance to rush. He was doing some, 3-point stance stuff off the edge. He was doing some 3 technique. So they were using him in a number of different ways. I think when we look at the guys that are for sure on this roster and you go down the list and you go Armstrong, Fowler, Lawrence, Williams, Hankins, Odigizua, Smith, Golston, Fehoko, that's 9 right there, Brian.
Yeah.
And so what's left is Darrell Johnson, Tyus Wheat, Ben Banagou, Isaac Alarcon, Quentin Bohanna, and Neville Gallimore. Is this really, do you think, as we enter training camp, just a question of, do you want to carry just 9? And in which case that looks to be pretty set, or if you're carrying 10, does this just come down to who's staying, Quinton Bohanna or Neville Gallimore?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's where I mentioned about the surplus. But I think, to me personally, Bobby, I carry 10 offensive linemen and 10 defensive linemen. I just do it. I just go ahead and, determine who the top guys are on that group. They probably are not going to be, but there are some positions that you can go lighter at that you don't. I mean, this team has a fascination with carrying wide receivers.
Yep.
They last year they carried like 7 of them going in, and you're like, and basically one of the receivers, Dennis Houston, I believe he cost you the kid that ended up with the Commanders.
Later in the year, he did.
Yeah,
not at the initial 53, but
right.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying. Their fascination with carrying these wide receivers, it hurt him for getting like a legitimate, a guy that they identify. Ridgeway, they identified him. They drafted him where they did, and the fact that they thought that Dennis Houston could help him, that could help the team more than him.
Yeah,
that just blows my mind. It absolutely. I mean, I'll find a wide receiver. I can't find defensive linemen. You get me in week 3, week 4, week 6 of the NFL season, and I have to go get a defensive tackle or edge, and I'm trying to get them off practice squads or poach and all that.
Yeah.
No, give me the 10 that I could carry the whole year, and I'll protect myself, whether that's offense or defensive line. I can't find those guys during the year. And the Cowboys, they got bit in the butt because of, carrying Dennis Houston, trying to get him on keep him on the active list, or, and unfortunately they lost him. And Ridgeway's going to be a pretty decent player for the Commanders. He already is.
I mean, he already, looked like he was making
that should be the lesson, Bobby.
That
should be the lesson. That should be the lesson right there. If they start talking about jacking with the numbers, and again, the surplus questions, if the surplus helps us get another player, like a running back or a linebacker or somebody like that, then let's go. But if it's just to say, oh, we got to carry all these receivers and no, that somebody in the pro department should stand up and say, remember what happened last year when we did this with Ridgeway and how sick we were when we were playing against him. That should be the message that somebody in the front office speaks up and says.
You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast, the Love of the Stars and Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian. So as we continue to look at where things stand with this roster, one of the things we can evaluate as we go through this roster inventory is some of these free agent names that continue to be out there on the street. Maybe some of the chatter that you're hearing about these guys, or your thought on if this is a position where you would be interested in maybe taking a look at a street free agent. So we're going to take a look at some of the best available remaining free agents. This is something that was written by Greg Rosenthal recently over at NFL.com. And while a couple of these guys have been snatched up since, there is still some availability here. And I guess we'll start off with the one that has probably had the most chatter about him in recent weeks, and is somebody who has apparently got several offers on the table. It doesn't sound like Dallas is involved in that, but that's Dalvin Cook. And I know we've talked about him a little bit here. He's 28 years old. He's, according to Tom Pelissero at the NFL Network, in line to still get significant money, even on the open market here in June, late June, maybe beginning in July before he signs. But Dalvin Cook as an option here in Dallas, and given where the running back room stands for the Cowboys, would you be in favor of kicking the tires on Dalvin Cook, or do you think, hey, that's probably out of their price range? They've already got $10 million, $11 million committed to Tony Pollard. They're probably best just rolling with what they have.
I feel like, to me, that Dalvin Cook is clearly worth my time. I do. I just don't feel like that. To me, it was, I've dealt with my guys with the gang of 7, that I like to talk about on the radio. I mean, my question to them is always, Cook still have anything left? And I get answers like this, like all the time. Yeah, he really does. And it's like, well, in what way? and he'll say he could still run, he could still align inside and out, veteran feel, savvy in coverage, tough, competitive. You have questions. We'll see what happens at running back. We'll see what happens, with the Cowboys, with Rico Dowdle and others, there. I want to believe that they've kind of figured some things out, but to me that's a wait and see right there. If Dalvin Cook, you have the opportunity to get Dalvin Cook, and the caveat is, oh, well, what's it going to cost? And I get it, but Dalvin Cook to me that's the ultimate insurance policy right now. I think Tony Pollard is going to be fine, but to a man, when I talk to my gang of 7, that's the one guy. They don't all agree on DeAndre Hopkins. They all feel like DeAndre Hopkins doesn't want to practice, doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do that. But with Dalvin Cook, everything about him is super positive. And I would hate for this season to be really in the balance if it comes down. Well, we'll see with Malik Davis. You and I have talked about him a bunch.
Yeah.
Why wasn't he used in the playoff game? We've talked about that a bunch. People like, well, you're being super critical. Well, I'm just telling you what people in the organization were telling me about him. So it looks like he's got a new lease on life, if you want to say. New running back coach, new opportunity, new coordinator. We'll see if Malik Davis could come in here and be the guy that we think he can be. Rico Dowdle, he's got to stay healthy. So, yeah, if you gave me an opportunity to kick the tires on Dalvin Cook, I'd at least make him say no. I'd at least, well, hey, we tried. He didn't want to be here. And I'm like, okay with that. That's fine. That's
another
okay.
name that's been kicked around a lot. And Dalvin Cook, I just, and not that you're saying he will, obviously. That's somebody to be in favor of. But obviously, Dalvin Cook is going to end up somewhere other than Dallas. I think the amount of money that he's going to want and what they're already paying Pollard and the opportunities he's probably going to have out there that Miami's apparently pursuing really aggressively and some of those things. Dalvin Cook, I would guess, is not going to be a Cowboy. You think you can write that one off. But the other big skill position player that people have been asking about this whole time, and I'm curious if after watching any of these workouts, seeing how Michael Gallup's moving, seeing how Jalen Tolbert looks, which we are going to get a better idea of at camp, but just the little bit that you've seen so far, is there anything that makes you say, hey, you know what, why don't we go out there and maybe see what's going on with DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, that was the one that when I mentioned gang of 7 guys, and I talked to some gals on the gang of 7 too that watch tape and things like that. So I when you ask about Hopkins, and I go, this is my question. I'm just being honest. I'm giving you my question to my gang of 7. Is there something on the inside about Hopkins that's keeping him from getting signed? That's my question to the gang of 7. And my one guy said this. He goes, there's always a story. Rather not get into details of issues, but know it has to be something. Either money, character, or both. So, you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. That was one guy who runs a team, general manager kind of guy. Another guy. Let me just. I'm sorry, I'm not totally prepared to. I got all these on my text message. I got all these on my text messages, and I just asked these people about it. I said, same question. Is there something? Here's another team. Is there something on the inside about Hopkins that's keeping him from getting signed? Price, age, durability, separation, declining athlete. Isn't a bad guy, but seems to be on the edge of stuff.
Okay. So it sounds like he's that's just 2 examples of 4 other texts that I got. Right.
Same thing. It's the same thing, and The word is that this guy doesn't want to practice, which is so surprising to me that New England is even interested in him.
Yeah.
Because the way that Belichick is big about availability, I mean, he comes from that Parcells tree of things, availability, being there on practice, being, the Cowboys dealt with that. The Cowboys dealt with that with Amari Cooper a little bit.
Do you know what kind of a practice player? I know you were a big fan of him as a player, but do you know what kind of a practice player Randy Moss was?
Man, I know. Yeah, I think Randy Moss was one of those guys that showed up in practice. I never heard Randy Moss being mentioned as a guy that didn't want to go out there and.
I was just trying to think of examples here of maybe.
Well, Amari Cooper's. It's about availability.
Sure.
But it sounds like to me that Dalvin Cook's more about just not wanting to do. Excuse me, not Dalvin Cook. DeAndre Hopkins. It's more about him just not wanting to do it, and it begs the old line. Or of the old Allen Iverson line about practice.
But talking about practice, yeah.
The guy is a gamer. There's no doubt about it. But they also went through that with Amari Cooper. You remember that well. And whether it was Amari Cooper was available, I mean, it was hell. He that one game they're trying to win in Philadelphia. They're down in the red zone, and he's not even on the field. And everybody's going, why are you not on the field? And he's like, well, I don't know. It's a coach's decision. Well, the coaches are probably thinking, well, we worked on goal line packages and you weren't a part of this. So we're trying to do something that you haven't been a part of. And so that goes back to the availability questions. I think DeAndre Hopkins is a hell of a football player. But, man, when you got 5 different teams, now I kind of understand. I know it's only 5 of 32. But when you get 5 front office guys and gals saying the same thing,
it matters.
It matters. They all are saying the same thing. And that might be coming out of, Cleveland might end up with this guy. Just because, we'll see what, their quarterback there, I mean, he might push, hey, it'd be nice to have a guy back. They had some really good success together. We'll see.
One more name for you here before we go on to our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag, Brian. Yannick Ngakoue is a really interesting name because the production at the position and how it's valued across the league, it's pretty stunning that the guy is on he's already played for 5 NFL teams in 7 seasons now.
Yeah.
And in each one of his 7 seasons, despite bouncing around 5 different teams, Jacksonville, a year split between Minnesota and Baltimore, the Raiders, the Colts last year, every single one of his 7 seasons, he's picked up at least 8 sacks. Yeah. And so when you see a guy who is that productive at such a critical position, is still under 30, is 28 years old this season, but has bounced around like he has. Mm-hmm. It obviously gives you a little bit of pause, but what would you think about Ngakoue? Do you just feel like, I think Ngakoue could come in and immediately be a really good pass rusher for this team, better than probably a lot of the guys they have. But do you think there's enough depth on this Cowboys team that it's like, let's not deal with a guy who's clearly got a problem finding any stability anywhere?
Man, that is one of those that I need to go back today to the Gang of 7 and ask why. And you brought up a great point. The guy has been productive everywhere he's been, but there's something clearly that's not connecting with the teams that he's with. He doesn't seem to get to stay anywhere for any length of time. And I wonder why that is. Maybe there's, like I say, there's always something to the story. I just feel like with the Cowboys, they will probably say, listen, we've got Sam Williams, we've got Armstrong, they will give you 4 or 5 names that they would rather take a crack at right now than Ngakoue. So I don't have a great answer for that one, but man, that's one of those times when you mention it or frame it the way you just framed it, there's got to be a little bit more to the story there.
Well, and one of the aspects we have a lot of Dallas area listeners who listen to us on 105 through the van, so they'll understand this analogy. But the Christian Wood question in Dallas was always, man, he's got such great ability. What's the issue? Is it just a malcontent thing? But then it was also like, well, he doesn't play any defense at all, literally. Yeah. And there is one aspect of Yannick Ngakwe's game. He's very productive as a pass rusher. Maybe it is just as simple as, and I don't know, maybe you'll find this out when we talk to the Gang of Seven. It may be as simple as he is an awful run defender. Yannick Ngakwe gives you nothing on run defense. And so it may just be that people go, yeah, it's great that he picks up 8 sacks, but if he's getting gashed and, not, keeping the edge and run defense, and we're giving up 15 yards a pop every time we go to that side of the field, it doesn't do us much good. But it's at least an interesting name I want to watch. There are a few others out there that maybe the Cowboys start poking around on some of these remaining names as they get into training camp. They've done that a couple times in recent years. They went after, got Malik Hooker after camp started, Anthony Barr. So they have made these sorts of deals before once they get into camp. So certainly something worth watching.
I promise you the next time that we get together, we'll have this discussion and I'll have an answer for you on that for the Love of the Star broadcast.
I'm looking forward to it. You are listening to the Love of the Star podcast. The Love of the Star is an Audacy podcast. You can find it on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag. This is where we turn things over to our dear sweet listeners for their questions. Let them tee us up and find out what they want to discuss. And before we jump into the mailbag, I do need to make mention July 4th from 8 a.m. to noon. Whether you're in the Dallas area and can listen on 105 through the fan, or you're outside the Dallas area and you just want to follow along with us on YouTube, Brian and I will be teaming up as the Love of the Star tandem on 105 through the fan to host from 8 a.m. to noon on July 4th. That'll be a live show. It's not going to be all Cowboys, but it will be mainly Cowboys is what we'll be talking that day. So if you guys want to jump on with us, you can either find us locally on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, or you can just go to YouTube or Twitch, find the 105.3 The Fan page, subscribe to it, and you'll get an alert on July 4th and can hang out with us for 4 hours that day.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, Bobby, that if I didn't have to work, that I would be listening to on Sirius Satellite Radio. They have like the top 1,000 songs of the 70s.
Oh,
so I was thinking that maybe, but now that I have to work, hey, come out and listen to us. Listen to us talk a little football. Maybe get you ready for some other things. Maybe we'll have a little barbecue talk, maybe a little fishing talk, maybe fireworks talk. Hey, there's all kinds of things going on.
Zero LSU talk.
LSU talk. I won't talk about LSU. Promise you, I won't talk about LSU.
Might have to. We'll be like 4 days. We'll be 4 days out from the MLB draft. We might have to talk about LSU.
Oh yeah, and hey, I'll have some. You know what? I've got some scout buddies. I got a gang of. I actually got a gang of two. Two in Major League. I got a gang of two in Major League Baseball. Yeah. I got some gang of two.
So we'll have all the insights for you on July 4th. You guys want to keep up with us. That's 8 a.m. to noon Central. All right, Brian, let's jump into some of these questions. First one from Vach Lombardi.
I love my man Vach.
Great
love
guy.
him. Love him.
Vach says, if Matt Willetsko has a ridiculously
good question,
and he looks like a starter, do you leave Tyler at left guard, your future left tackle, or save money on Steele, future right tackle? This is a very interesting question. I'm curious how you tackle it, Brian.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. I was, as people who've listened to me a long time now, well, at least a year, I was really, really wrong about Terrence Steele. I think Terrence Steele needs to be here. I think Terrence Steele needs to be in the lineup. But as a former personnel guy, I could see exactly why Vach asked this question, because if it's a deal where you're paying Steele this year on the tender, what is it, like $4.5 million on that tender?
I'll look it up now.
Somewhere right around there. Okay, if you're looking for a long-term deal, which he probably is, and he's going to probably continue to play at a high level, you can't.
$4.3 million this year.
Okay, there you go. So $4.3 million on that tender. You could be in a situation like, well, who's more important to paying? Is it more important paying the tackle? Can we get a deal done with the center? Can we, what's going on at left guard? So, Stephen Jones has talked about you can't draft them all and you can't pay them all, kind of a situation. If Matt Willetsko shows that he's got the similar trajectory And let's be honest. I mean, when Zach Martin missed having Terrence Steele next to him in the second half of that season, he really, really did. Tyron Smith, did the best he could, but they weren't the same group without him being over there. So from a front office standpoint, if Weletsko shows me that he can handle the job and can work with the guards and can be productive in the running game and can set up in pass protection and all those things, boy, I am sure looking at that. If that saves me some big time money, going forward, I'm going to look at it. But man, you have to be walking on water if you're Matt Weletsko, because I think the world now of Terrence Steele. Dead ball's wrong about him, but you know what? He's a guy that's proven his worth. But it might come down to they need that money. They can't afford to give him $10, $11, $12 million to be a right tackle. That might not be something that they can stomach right now.
Next question here kind of expands on.
Did I answer that the right way? You think?
I think you
did.
You
feel the same way? Do you feel like
I do? There is part of me that says, look, if you were to just move, if you find that he's good, and part of this question would also have to do with, do we find that Weletsko is better at one specific side? Just because he's good at right tackle, like Terrence Steele has shown he's good at right tackle, left tackle he's not as good.
Right.
You find that maybe that's the case with Weletsko. So you may not even have a choice to say, well, we can move Smith inside and put Weletsko at left tackle. It may not be an option. I think that Weletsko is somebody that the Cowboys believe has starter potential.
I think they do too. I think they do too. And the fact that he was able, I feel like they got that shoulder situation, that subluxation. They had that problem, and I think they got that thing tightened up.
He is a tremendous foot athlete for his size.
No question.
It's ridiculous the way that guy moves for his size. That's one of the reasons I think they do like trying Weletsko out inside a guard, because he has the ability to get up at the second level with that size.
Right.
So I don't. Maybe he's viewed as a Zach Martin replacement. Maybe it's nope. We got our tackles, Steele and Tyler, and no, this is future right guard. That may be what it is. But here's a question from Brandon Laurie, and I think that it kind of expands on that. The offensive line could look completely different in 2024. Here's the worst case scenario for you, Brian. Biotish and Steele walk in free agency. Tyron Smith and Zach Martin retire. Then Tyler Smith is the only one left next year. That's a worst case scenario, but that's not the most impossible scenario. There's a series of events that could lead to that being the case. So with that in mind, how important is the development this season for Weletsko, Ball, Farniak, and Richards?
Okay, this is where I did talk to Will McClay about Awesome Richards. I point blank. I said, listen, I think you stole one here. We've seen them draft mid-round offensive linemen, usually from a directional school or something like that, that just hasn't really panned out like it needs to pan out. But they might have actually hit. The fact that you watch Awesome Richards play against Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, you see like a real player there. They'll tell you he just needs to get stronger. The athletic ability with him, I think they stole one. I really do. So that gives me hope. The Farniak thing, honestly, I think if something happened with Tyron Smith, you kick Tyler Smith to left tackle, and now who's the starting left guard? It's Matt Farniak, So maybe that's some way of kind of keeping him in the mix. Maybe Matt Farniak is your center. When if everything in this kind of this doomsday offensive line scenario. Sure. So I am not as high on Ball. I'm just not. I felt like, with Weletsko, he misses like the majority of training camp. He comes back like the last game, and he looks in the last preseason game. He's out there playing. He looks better than Ball. And he didn't do anything really all training camp except, they threw him in there at the end to have to play. So I'd like to, I'll admit if I'm wrong on Ball like I was Steele. I just don't, if you had to power rank him, of the guys you talked about, he would be the last guy on my list. I just don't trust him right now. I don't. And that would be one that I think I could maybe be better, find better, that kind of thing. What about a guy like TJ Bass? I mean, maybe one of these guys that we're not talking about so much that they got, as a undrafted free agent could be a guy like all of a sudden in camp. It's like, wow, this guy's got, TJ Bass should have probably been drafted from Oregon. He wasn't. Yeah. So I that's kind of my hope that somebody like that kind of shows up. But my trust level with Ball is minimal right now.
When you look at specifically Farniak, I think one of the things that's important to remember is even if they never view him as a starter, which I don't know that they don't, they may feel like he can be somebody who would eventually start. I think that they feel like in a pinch, he could play anywhere. He could play any of the 5 spots. I think they feel that same way about Austin Richards. Yeah. And so the idea being that even if they don't view those guys ever as being full-time starters, those are 2 guys who could hang around for a very long time just based off of that. As being guys who have the ability to cover anything that they need and play either side, snap the ball, whatever they got to do. Those are very rare traits, and I think they really believe in Farniak and Awesome Richards as guys who can do that. Next question here. You know what? It is his mailbag, so why don't we ask a question from him? Dean Julia is asking, what is a good upside player comp for Damone Clark, like a player he can grow into being? Now, I know I just thrust this on you, Brian, so I'm not going to – I'll give you a sec to think about it. I'm going to throw out my name first.
Go ahead. All right?
So the high upside projection for me on Damone Clark, because I've thought this for a little bit now, is the guy that I would hope he could eventually become this guy, Demario Davis. That's the guy that I would like to imagine he could become on the high upside. The longtime Saints and Jets linebacker, and a guy who I think physically is very similar, plays with a real intensity and violence and has, really fantastic speed to run down some of these guys sideline to sideline. I think that on the high upside, you would say if Damone Clark could become Demario Davis, you'd be very happy with that, and it's certainly within the realm of possibility. But does anybody stand out for you, Brian, as a good player comp for Damone Clark?
Could he be another LSU guy?
Which one?
Brady James.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Could he be could he be like a physical point of attack player, rundown guy, plays a little bit of some coverage, maybe not the best at it, but good enough, has a nose for the ball, always kind of in the pile guy.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that if you're talking about Cowboy comparisons, that he would be a guy, because I see like Brady had great physical toughness. I think Clark has got toughness. I think he just needs to learn what he needs, how to play the scheme, where he needs to be. Maybe that you'll get a little bit more awareness. But I kind of like the physical makeup of him and how he's able to play at the point of attack. So I would compare him to maybe the high end would be Brady James.
Well, and I think that's a good comp. Physically, they're similar. They play with a lot of physicality. I would actually say Damone Clark's probably a better athlete than Brady James was.
Probably so.
That's a benefit there, because Brady was generally kept inside.
Right.
I feel like because of some of the athletic limitations. So he wasn't going to be as much of a run and chase will. Damone Clark can play, I think, inside or play off ball if he needs to.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the size and the physicality at the point of attack. Yeah.
I think it's a great comp, but I think Brady was probably where Brady has Damone Clark beat right now. I think Brady was a high IQ linebacker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so you get some trade-offs there, but in general, I don't think that's a bad comp at all. I think that one makes a lot of sense. All right, that does it for us here today on the Love of the Star. As we mentioned, keep an eye out for July 4th. You can join us over at 105 through the Fan. If you're in Dallas, you can turn us on your radio. If you're outside of Dallas, you can catch us on YouTube or Twitch. Just go find 105 through the Fan and subscribe there. But Brian and I will be with you live 8 a.m. to noon on 105 through the Fan on July 4th. And we'll be back with another episode for you guys here shortly. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We will talk to you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.